In today's video that I shouldn't have to make, very big pixels. You can probably see the individual pixels on your screen even if you're watching this on a phone, because I'm zoomed a long way in. Across the top is a line, which is the x-axis. In this case it is the gun ownership axis, which is guns per 1,000 people, guns in civilian hands per 1,000 people, according to a website, gunpolicy.org, hosted by the University of Sydney, which I shall link in the description if the site is still up. The y-axis, down the left side, is firearm homicides per 10 million people per year. This is because the website gives statistics for guns per 100 people to 1 decimal place, and firearm homicides per 100,000 people per year to 2 decimal places. So the most accurate level at which I can portray it is 1 pixel is 1 gun per 1,000 people across the x-axis, and 1 pixel is 1 firearm homicide per 10 million people per year down the y-axis. Why is the y-axis down? 2 reasons. 1, GIMP numbers pixels from the top left, and it was just easier to label the dots as I added them and then move the whole thing 100 pixels than it would have been to label the dots as I added them and then flip it in the y direction and then move all the labels, or try to label the dots afterwards. And 2, this way, being at the top is good. It's no homicides. Being at the bottom is bad. It's lots of homicides. Down is bad, up is good. This is a fairly conventional way to portray stuff. So we can see various individual dots. Up here in the very top left we have J, Japan. Next to it, SK, South Korea. Basically no homicides. Way out to the right, but also on that no homicides axis, we have I for Italy. Also high enough up, low enough homicide rates to need to be labelled actually on the negative number side of the gun ownership axis. We have HU for Hungary and N for Norway. You can see their dots are actually significantly down here. Left of Hungary, UK, same homicide rate with fewer guns. And way over to the left here we have DK for Denmark, and the dot for Denmark is the little one where the upper arm of the K is pointing, just there. The much bigger dot there, VN, is Vietnam. Vietnam has slightly more guns than Denmark, far fewer guns than the UK, a much higher, well, it's got something like twice the firearm homicide rate. The reason it's a bigger blob is I use blob size for overall homicide rate. I believe that's a 3, the pluses are 2s and the single dots are 1s. If I'd made the blobs big enough to accurately represent the overall homicide rate, they would have been so big you couldn't see what was going on, or the diagram would have been absolutely immense. So they're kind of vague. Vietnam's one of these that doesn't really seem to fit the pattern, where you have this huge homicide rate, apparently very few of them being guns, compared to all these other countries. You know, it's the one with the highest overall. Firearm homicide rate, very low. Firearm ownership rate, quite low. Not as low as Japan, obviously. And South Korea seems to be doing, well, no, Italy seems to be doing better than everywhere else. It has a huge gun ownership, no firearm homicide rates, and it's a single dot, so a very low homicide rate overall. Out to the right, D for Germany. D for Deutschland, which is Germany in German. This dot above the D is Germany's dot, where they have somewhat more guns than Italy. And if you compare them all the way across here to the UK and Hungary, they have vastly more guns. They have a homicide rate about the same as Denmark. But look how many more guns they have than Denmark. Then we have A for Austria. NZ, New Zealand, is the upper right of these two crosses. Higher homicide rate overall and higher firearm homicide rate than Austria, with fewer guns. The lower left is Finland, that's why it's labelled Fin. Then way down here, considerably fewer guns than Norway, Italy, Germany, Austria, New Zealand, or Finland, and a much higher homicide rate, much higher firearm homicide rate, which is farther down the screen, than almost anyone else shown. Certainly and a higher overall homicide rate, the most places labelled, we have Canada, labelled Can. To the left of it there's an H, which I think... No, it's not Helvetica. Hellenica. It could be Hellenica. It could be Greece. That's another plus. It's another one where the overall homicide rate is quite high. Also, the firearm homicide rate is quite high. It's the lowest on your screen. The dot is lowest on the screen, meaning the firearm homicide rate there is the highest on your screen, which is why the y-axis normally has 0 at the bottom. Then we have a pair up here. P for Portugal, CH for Switzerland. It stands for something, I forget what. SW is Sweden. You can see, what have we got? Even Austria, New Zealand, Finland, Switzerland, Portugal, Sweden, France, Australia, labelled Oz. E for España. B for Belgium, and NL for Netherlands. They all have firearm homicide rates than Hungary and the UK, and Norway and Italy and South Korea and Japan. But across from Belgium has that bigger overall rate. From Spain across to Switzerland, there's not much change in the homicides. From Belgium across to New Zealand, there's almost no change. Overall homicide rate or firearm homicide rate. Vastly different gun ownership. Put a little H down here. Whoever H is doing very badly. Or are they? Are they really doing badly? You may have noticed these are very large pixels because I've zoomed a long way in. And you know me, I would just use, larger blobs spread farther apart and not as much zoom if this was all the data I was plotting. Zooming out, holy shit, you guys. What the hell, USA? Seriously, what? You're way out there beyond 1,000 guns per 1,000 people. Your firearm homicide rate has put you that far down the screen compared to all those other countries, and your overall homicide rate is represented by the size of that blob. What the hell are you guys doing? What's going on? Lovers of graphs and astute observers may have noticed there is no label on the y-axis and be thinking, why is the y-axis not labelled? Well, the y-axis is labelled. It's just not labelled on the screen, because to see the label on the y-axis you kind of have to scroll a bit farther this way and get to South Africa, where the overall homicide rate is lower than the USA. And this is per 100,000 people or per million people or per 10 million people, not the total number. But the firearm homicide rate is so much higher, despite them having far fewer guns. They're there with Hungary and Belgium, but way higher overall homicide rate and firearm homicide rate. On firearm homicides, they're making the USA look safe. On overall homicides, they're not. But it's still a scary place. That's not the bottom of the image. This page intentionally left blank. This page also intentionally left blank because I needed both those blank pages to get that blob in the right place. Oh, and there's Guatemala. Same website, different data set, because the x-axis gets relabeled. The y-axis is exactly the same. I've added little pips on it now at, they're probably 100 pixel intervals. depending what the zoom is. I don't know, there might be 50 pixel intervals. I forget what the intervals are, but you can look it up on the website and get more up-to-date stats than there are in this, because these are old graphs. And, confirm that the numbers are correct for yourself. The x-axis has changed. It is no longer guns per 1,000 people, it is percentage of adults living in a household with at least one gun. Obviously, neither of those stats can tell you the whole picture. There are a few things that you may have noticed are missing, like what kind of gun? I mean, are we talking little pocket revolvers, or are we talking shotguns, or deer rifles, or the smaller caliber, higher capacity, lighter AR-15, AR-18, AKM, AK-74 kind of rifles, or something really light like a Ruger 1022 kind of thing. Percentage of adults living in a household with at least one gun doesn't distinguish between 25% of households have one pistol and, one gun of some description, and 25% of households have 5 guns. And it doesn't really distinguish between adults are living in groups of 5 with at least one gun in the house and adults are living alone with at least one gun in each house. It doesn't distinguish between the 30% of the adult population who are young adult males are all carrying pistols because they think they're living in the Wild West and have to defend their turf and their women. This Thog 3, take Thog girl. Thog strong. Thog have boomstick. Thog make loud noise. Thog smash. Take Thog girls. Thog strong. Or the same, did I say 30%? A different 30%. The 30% of adults who are living outside town each have a shotgun or a rifle to protect their goats, their chickens, their crops from dangerous wildlife, or indeed themselves and their guests from dangerous wildlife. Those are very different situations, but each of those would be 30% of adults, or 35 or 40%, or whatever it would work out to be, living in a household with at least one gun. So it's not distinguishing between those, which is probably important. And you can see it's a spread. There is sort of an empty space here. I don't know whether the mouse cursor shows up. Zoom in just a little so I can scroll down. Now, I think the mouse cursor does show up. There's this big empty space with DC and Louisiana just spoiling it for everybody by being there. Otherwise, you would have this wedge, left of the capital C of Connecticut, left of New Jersey, left of Illinois, left of Maryland. You would have this big empty space. And obviously there's this big sort of dense cluster. Everything from South Carolina up to Nebraska and Kansas, from Arizona across to Tennessee, kind of this area, this blob, which is a lot of states. And here we have a GIF, and I don't know how well it's going to show in this. It's probably not. No. Windows Photo Viewer doesn't do GIFs. So I'll just have to talk you through it. If somebody wanted to be slightly dishonest about this, let's just be dishonest and show you only part of the data. I'll zoom in so I don't have DC and Louisiana on the screen. There we go. Hawaii, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, Nevada, Texas, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi. There you go. Increasing gun ownership, or that's a bit of a bent line. Maybe if we go New York, Arizona, Ohio, Indiana, Georgia, Michigan, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi. It's a fairly straight line. If I just showed you that data set, I could say, hey, look, the more people live in a household with at least one gun, the higher the firearm homicide rate. Which, of course, is getting correlation and causation all mixed up. maybe in places with high firearm homicide rates, people are more likely to have a gun in the house. Maybe something else contributes to both. But I can also do the same dishonest presentation the other way around. I can go Illinois, Delaware, Florida. Illinois is the one above the capital I of Illinois. Florida, low left, Delaware, upper right is the little pair there. To Arizona, Nevada, Virginia, Wisconsin, Iowa, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota. Idaho and North Dakota are almost vertical, but we'll let that pass. There you have a sloping line you could draw in that cherry-picked data set, or you could do a much gentler slope from New Jersey, California, Nevada, Virginia, Kansas, Nebraska, West Virginia to Wyoming, where you have more and more of the population are living in a household with at least one gun, and the firearm homicide rate, and indeed the overall homicide rate, still represented by blob size, is getting smaller and smaller. One thing you may notice here, the biggest blobs are at the bottom. The homicide rate and the firearm homicide rate, they're higher in some states and lower in others. There's no really major case of a huge homicide rate but no firearms involved, or a huge firearm homicide rate but a low overall homicide rate. There are no tiny dots at the bottom, there are no big dots at the top. So what we have here is two statistics that don't correlate. You're going to have to find something else. Right, what do Hawaii, South Dakota, North Dakota, New Hampshire, Maine, Idaho, and I guess Utah have in common? Or indeed, you could also add Massachusetts, Oregon, Minnesota, Vermont, and Montana. What do Maryland, Michigan, South Carolina, and Arkansas have in common, apart from where they are on the graph? For that matter, you could ask what Hawaii, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, California, Delaware, Florida, Illinois, and Maryland have in common. And altitude? Weather? Not really. I mean, California and Hawaii have some pretty good altitudes, and New York, we've got the Catskill Mountains. Arizona has it. Florida doesn't, though. Maryland isn't exactly mountainous. Over on the right, what does South Dakota have in common with Arkansas? Longitude? Maybe, but then you've got Alaska over on the right as well, which isn't at that longitude. And you don't have the west coast on the left or down the middle. One thing I've noticed is what happens if you do an image search for each of these states. Do an image search for Hawaii, one for Massachusetts, one for Maine, one for Idaho, one for North Dakota, one for South Dakota, one for Montana, one for Oregon. What do you see? Beautiful countryside. Do an image search for Maryland. What do you see? Fucking Baltimore. I know, I mean, I don't know these places well. Maybe someone in the audience knows them better than I do and tell me, actually, this correlates exactly to membership of the New Independent Fundamentalist Baptist Church. Or sales of Coldplay albums, or the ratio of funding of college football to funding of scholarships for science degrees, or something. Anyway, the actual point of this video is that putting up the video is the easiest way to post a link to gunpolicy.org on YouTube. So I'm going to put that in the description.